go over a few techniques, a few good examples and bad examples and techniques on practicing and drilling manuals. One thing I really recommend with manuals is being comfortable with coming off the bike over the back in case that does happen, not freezing up and staying on the bike as you fall back. So you do want to learn how to pop off, and that is very hard when you're still working on the manual because you usually don't pop high enough to get off. So before you even do that, we're going to do step-ons from the back with the bike already high. I usually put my pedals level, get my forward foot going first. You can even kind of do it like one-footed on that forward foot, but ideally try to, bring the other one back and get on normally. But just get used to sort of being on the pedals and getting on the bike and being comfortable with it pretty high up in the air. And after that, I'm going to practice my step-offs off the back of the bike. And I usually I want to do these first if possible. Not while I'm practicing the manual. I want to intentionally loop out the bike. So I'm going to do a real high lift, and then as it gets way up, I can even jump off a little bit early. So when I jump off early, I'm actually jumping pretty comfortably and normally because I'm going off the bike early and I'm letting the bike kind of fly away. And my jump off is more in a standing position. When you do jump off when you're manualing, you're probably not going to have the luxury of doing it early and being in a standing position. It's kind of going to come to you at the last second, and then you're going to have to jump back and crunch a bit. So now that we've gone over those safety techniques, we're going to go into the actual technique of manualing, which is pretty simple. You just have to hack away at it in a parking lot over a long period of time. What we don't want to do is practice with the bad technique over a long period of time and reinforce those bad habits. So no leaning all the way back and trying to start the manual in the balanced position. And no trying to pull the bike up really tall and stay centered the whole time without pushing your weight back. It starts in the centered position and it slowly moves into the balancing position. So the best place to practice this is usually in a parking lot with these nice convenient lines that we can look at and engage. Ideally flat. This one has a bit of a hill to it, which can work to your benefit. Going uphill makes it easier to get into the balancing point with a little bit more comfort. Going downhill makes it easier to hold them longer, but it's a bit scary because you're gaining speed as you might loop out. Ideally find a flat parking lot. And your goal is just going to be finding that sweet spot in between the lines. Try not to reinforce any bad techniques. And your goal is to just work on that big lift, get into the sweet spot. After you do your lift, then you lean back and keep gauging your lines, how far you're holding it. And once you're in the balancing spot, if you get it really nice, you might be able to basically just stay there. A lot of times you're going to need to start angling off and readjusting a bit. That's much harder to explain, and it's kind of personal. You'll come to that in time, but just know that once you practice enough, you can kind of lock in. But ultimately, especially in mountain biking, if you were to do it on a trail that's uneven, you're gonna need to be more dynamic and flare your legs out and go back and forth with your balancing point. Also, quickly, in terms of settings, not too important. Hardtail or full suspension, both is fine. Try to leave the rebound fast. If you have the rebound slow and sucking, it's just gonna make it a bit harder for you. Keep your seat down ideally. If you're in a safe place, ideally flat parking lot, don't cover your brakes if you have to. Eventually, once you get stronger, you can start covering your brakes with your fingers. Obviously for this, a higher tire pressure might help. Gearing isn't too important, but on a full suspension, I like to keep it in the hardest gear so that it's actually not diving into the suspension so easily. Also, if you do happen to have a long wheelbase, long chainstay, low stack bike. A lot of XC bikes are like that. It is going to be harder. What you can do is buy a riser bar and throw it on. You don't have to ride with it all the time, but initially learning to practice with that might help. And then you can swap to the normal bars once you're more comfortable with it. But the riser bar raising the stack is going to pull your body up, and the feel is almost like it's shortening the chainstay. Obviously it's not, but it feels leverage-wise like you have a shorter chainstay. And of course, one of the most important things you can do is film yourself, whether you use a tripod or have a friend do it, and find out what you're doing wrong, because your feel is almost never going to be 100% correct. It's just like that classic thing where you do your first jump and it felt great, and you look at it on a video and you barely got 1 foot of air. Manualing could be the same way. You can feel like you're getting the front wheel high up, getting like 45 degrees, but no, you barely lifted it and you're constantly fighting and you're not even getting into the balance point.